can certainly see the change that has taken place in these last few weeks. You know, last week we talked about why am I alive? We talked about the question of existence. That was so very, very important as we trying to give life to a meaning to the life that we live. Now, the second question is why the significance. The significance. As you look at the question of significance, this battery is just a little hot. As you look at the question of significance, I'm a dumb old country boy, so I'll go to the definition and say, you know, you're going to have to explain to me in detail what the word significance means. Preacher, you know what it means? Yeah, but I want you to explain it country style. And so this is what the word significance means, so that I can understand it. The quality of being found worthy of attention. In other words, important. The question of significance. Does my life really matter? I call your attention. In the winter of 1912, at the age of 1919, at the age of 12, George is with some friends. He's with Bert and Ernie Bishop. Ring a bell? A good friend by the name of Marty Hatch, Sam Wainwright, and his little brother Harry. And they're taking a snow shovel sliding down a slope onto a frozen riverbed. Harry's turn. And he slides down, goes further out than anybody else, and falls through. Ring a bell? They form a chain, and George jumps in and helps save his brother Harry. In the meantime, he catches a cold and loses his hearing in his left ear. I fast forward to 9 years later. Just a few years later, he finds himself working in Cower's drugstore. Mr. Cower had just received a telegram in regards to his son that had passed away from influenza. He's not in the best shape mentally. He misdiagnoses some medicine. George catches it, goes back, and you see the story as he's pounding him on the side and realizes what he's going wrong, and you see the blood coming out of George's ear. Years later has passed. He's attending the graduation of Harry, his younger brother's graduation. There he meets the future love of his life, Marty Hatch's 18-year-old baby sister named Mary. Ring a bell? We keep going forward and see all these things happening in his life, and finally, when you think that you've seen the very last of the movie, it's only starting. Things have gone south. You know, he's the owner and president now of the savings and loan, remember? Things have gone terrible. Now George catches himself right there at the bridge's edge, thinking his life's not important. And boy, if old Clarence Oddbody didn't come along and save his life. Clarence is trying to win his pair of wings, jumps in instead of George. Well, the truth of the matter is this: that story existing, and even though that was a failure when it first came out, it's watched time and time again every year when Christmas rolls around. And yet in that story, it's simply this, that George realized that his life did matter. Because what Clarence did said, okay, if your life did matter, if you didn't exist, you're better off dead than you're alive, because of the insurance policy that he had. And so Clarence just showed him what his life would be like if he wasn't there. If he didn't save Harry's life, Harry would never gone on to be a World War II hero and shot down 15 planes and bombed a troop, and two of them were bombing a troop transport. He would have shot them down. All the troops on that troop transport would have been killed. He wouldn't have married Mary and had all those children. She's the old maid at the library. Remember that? All these small little things. As a matter of fact, all those houses that he built through the savings alone, all of a sudden now it becomes Pottersville. And old man Potter took over the town. And he realized that his life mattered. As we go through life in one of three levels. First of all, we go through what we call the survival level. Everybody lives for the weekend. They just make it through one day at a time. We live just to exist. We're controlled by our circumstances. Think about that. And then if you look, that's what we call the survival mode. But if you look concerning the world standards, this is important. Very important. If you compare this nation to the remainder of the world, and the next standard is what we call the successful standard. By world standards, we've got it made. We have a comfortable living compared to the rest of the world. We're extremely wealthy compared to the rest of the world. We have our possessions, we have our freedom, we have health, prestige, a lot of things compared to the rest of the world, and yet you see book after book after book written. For individuals that may be so successful saying their life is not being fulfilled, they're missing something. And a lot of Christians may be successful, but they still feel empty on the inside. And this is where we need to look at the third level, because this is the level of what we call significance. Now I know the Scripture teaches us not to think highly of ourselves. I understand that. But I will say this about me, and I will say this about you. We are important. Let me finish now. To somebody. And it's that person that we are important to that makes all the difference. You see, when you know the meaning of life, it gives significance. When you know that your life matters to God, that brings significance. And when you know God's purpose and the reason why we're here and that we should be living them out, that gives us significance. In Isaiah 44, very interesting passage of Scripture. Isaiah said this. I've said 49, my bad, fellas. Now here's Isaiah having a bad moment like sometimes you and I do. I mean, here's a prophet of Israel that's preaching and seems like nothing's going on. Been there, done that, I'm telling you. We've all had our down days. Here's one of Isaiah's down days. He said, I've labored in vain. I spent my strength for nothing. And it's just, I've done it in vain. I could have been done something else. You ever had that attitude sometimes? Yeah. That's because we forget that we are important to somebody. He had forgotten what he said earlier, a few chapters in Isaiah 44. I like this. He said, Thus saith the Lord that made thee and formed thee from the womb. Sometimes we forget why we were created. Remember what we talked about last week? God created me so that He could love me. I don't know if you thought about this week or not, but that's something that is just so profound and mind-boggling and deep to think that the purpose of my creation, your creation, is so that God could have someone to love. So He created me. Knowing all the faults and problems and heartaches that I was going to give Him, and yet He created me so that He could love me. And Isaiah had forgotten about that important thing. But wait a minute. The psalmist goes into detail. And he says this in Psalms 139:16. Your eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy book all my members were written, which in and continuance were fashioned when as yet they were none of them. Let me explain this to you the way that I understand it. You see, that word substance reminds me of how life begins when we talk about the embryo. Picture that in your mind if you can. And yet there is a word that is found, a Hebrew word that is found in that word unperfect. It's only used one other time in Scripture, and it's used over in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 2, verse 8, when you got Elijah and Elisha that are standing by the Jordan River. Now remember, Elijah is about to be preceded. His ministry is going to be taken over by Elisha. Now here you've got those guys standing in front. Elijah takes off his outer garment. It's an outer garment, a sleeveless garment called a mantle. And he rolls up that garment, and he uses it to part the Jordan River. Now he rolls it up. It doesn't look like a mantle. It doesn't look like a piece of clothing. It's all rolled up. But Elijah knew what it was. He knew exactly what it was, because he is the one that it belonged to. He is the one that rolled it up. When God created us, thine eyes did see my substance. The embryo that had no shape, form, or fashion of a human at all. When you got the draftsman on his board, on his computer screen, as they begin to design something. I talked to some cousins of mine that worked many years in the General Motors plants in Flint, Michigan. And they would tell me how many times as they would start designing the cars of the next year or whatever, they would fashion them out of clay and shape and mold them out of clay. Sure, you may have a sketch in your mind and try to shape and mold it. It's amazing how God knew what you would look like even before there was even a form. He already had it on his blueprint. He knew exactly what we were going to be. And this is what Isaiah is learning. It's what David had proclaimed. That you did see my substance yet being imperfected. And in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned when yet there was none of them. God knew just exactly what he created before mankind created anything. Before mankind knew that he was even created, God said, this is how it's going to be. I see it all right here in front of me. The significance of being created by God. But wait a minute. There's something that you and I as a Christian need to drastically understand. The significance of someone that may not think of themselves as being important. I shared with some of our guys this morning in our office something that I thought was very, very important. A few years back when I had a water leak there in the basement, it ruined a lot of stuff. You know, I'm not going to complain about our insurance company. I know how the thing was written. I just didn't like the things that you had to go through to get what they had. But we had what we call a replacement clause, and that is so deceiving. Let me tell you why. I remember some things that were destroyed by the wet water. And even though they were willing to replace what you lost, what we lost, some things were irreplaceable. Some things of my wife's mother, some things of my mother's. And even though I see a china cabinet sitting there in the house right now that was brand new now, and it's replaced, that's not my mom's. And it's interesting, the old antique dinette chairs that were made out of solid wood. It didn't matter. Wood and water don't go together. That fell apart because of the water saturation. You couldn't replace them if you wanted to with what it actually was. Now think about this. This is good. God created me, and he saw the importance of me and you. And I know that I'm created so He may love me, but wait a minute. I have to know that my life does matter to someone. And I don't have to prove to anybody that my life is important to them. What I have to understand is that I am important to someone else, and that is my Creator. Question, why? Well, I'll look in Psalms 33, verse 11. It says, the counsel of the Lord stands forever. You know, He has so much wisdom, so many things that He says that are so meaningful and impactful. And He says those things stand forever. He created me so He could love me. But the reason why my life matters is because it is important. But let me finish. I am important to Him. So I have to ask the question, knowing who I am and knowing something about Him, God, why am I so important to You? You ever look in the mirror, like what you see sometimes? I don't. So why is this so important to Him? Why are we so significant? He says, my counsel stands forever, the thoughts of His heart to all generations. Now catch this. His purpose for creating me is eternal. His counsel, they do not change. So God, what is the significance of me? And sometimes we try to change. Okay, you ever took something that was made for this, you used it for something else? Yes, we have. I told you the story. I'll never forget this. And if I've told it and I forgot it, hey, you're old enough where you forgot I told you. And I can't repeat what I just said. We leave Nancy's dad's. We drive down the gravel road toward Reeves, Missouri. That's a no-no. Reeves, Missouri is just a terrible place to live back in those days. Gobbler wasn't much better than that one road we shouldn't have been on, and we were. But it was a shortcut to get around. Come across a man stranded on the side of the road, and never forget the black man. Now I pulled over and I was going to stop. Nancy didn't want us to stop because her dad had told a lot of stories about that road going up down. I stopped. He asked if I had a set of bumper cables, and I said no, and I didn't. He needed a boost. I'm in a brand new 1972 Ford Maverick. That was, the inside looks like a Mercury Comet. It was fully loaded. Now that was in 1973. It's me, 72. That was that fancy deal. Had the carpet and whole sheet match. But anyway, he said, well, do you have a jack? Now listen, I know I'm dumb, but wait a minute. If you've got a car that needs a boost and you ask for a jack, I'm a little dumbfounded. I said, back then, the jack stood about this tall, had a deal that you sat there and you actually had like a lug wrench and you jacked the car up. The little jacks wasn't about that flat, about like that. They were the good. Mel Camino's got one. I said, yes, sir. He said, I need your jack. Nancy's eye this big. I mean, she's scared. I take the jack out of the trunk of that car and I give it to him. He said, now pull your car bumper to bumper. Bumper to bumper. Jack, positive to positive, boom, started that car right up. The importance of that jack took on an entirely different meaning from that day forward. The significance of our creation from this day forward ought to take on different meaning. I'm created and I'm not perfect. Well, wait, this is good. I'm created and I'm not perfect. God knew that. But He still said that I was created to last for a long time. The word is forever. I'm created to last forever. Like this? No. But because the counsel of God shall stand, and the thoughts of his heart to all generations. Keep this in mind. 2 Corinthians 5:1 says this. Paul says, "For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle was dissolved, and one day this earthly tabernacle will be dissolved, we will pass." Death is simply the ceasing to exist here and the beginning to exist somewhere else. Long before I was created, and Paul says this in the book of Ephesians chapter 1, before the foundation of the world, that was before anything ever happened except God. That's as far back as I can take me in the beginning, God. That's it. That's all I know. And if God wanted me to know anything else, He would have put it there. But before the foundation of the world, God had a plan for imperfect man to last forever. So when God created me to love me, He knew that He was going to love me for a long, long time. And He figured out a way to take care of my imperfections. And the very things that He did not fix, chose not to fix, and chose to put and bury and go back to the dust where it came from. He came up with a plan. So if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things become new. If our earthly tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. I'm not talking about your mansion of gold here. I'm talking about what God is going to love forever. I'm talking about what is going to be with God forever. That's how important I am. Now listen. I replaced my mama's old china hutch with something, that may be a lot prettier. But I want to tell you, if you look at it real close, and if you look at how it's all put together, the quality is not the same. I mean, you can't go back and find that old woodworking furniture today like you had way on back there. You just can't do it. But God, when this imperfected, this chipped up, this scratched, this old beat up piece of furniture that He created, when He gets rid of it and it's replaced with something else, God can give us something far, far better than what is dissolved. I don't know what this new body is like that I'm going to receive. Paul couldn't understand it either. But he looked forward to the day that he was going to receive a new body. He understood the purpose of this body. He also understood the significance, the importance of this body. Okay, preacher, you said the body is important. Now finish the statement. It's important to Him. Question, why? Why? It brings me to the third question I'm going to close. The question of intention. The question of intention. What is my purpose? I want you to think about that. We've talked about two questions. The question of significance. We've talked about the question of existence. And we've seen why that I'm created so God could have someone to love. And we see the question of significance, that I am important to God. And He wants me to be with Him forever. Hey, compared my life and the time I've spent here so far to where I'm going to spend it, this is not even a drop in the bucket. So why not allow Him to prepare me for what He has waiting for me? Consider this the boot camp for what's waiting. Just think what some of our loved ones know we don't know. We read about it, but there's nothing like experiencing it, right? You know, I can read about places you visited, but you experienced it. And then, if I'm created because God loved me, and I am so important to Him that He wants me to live forever, I've got to ask the last question. Why I am here, no matter how long or short, what purpose does He have for me? Heads bowed, eyes closed.